am Christine, and I'm here because I like sex. I think that sex can be powerful and magical, like a unicorn cresting a rainbow, or it can be as boring as getting off because you've been trapped in the same house since March and you have watched everything that is on Netflix twice. I think that it can be fun and weird and full of laughs and hopefully maybe farts. I'm also here because I literally work here. I'm a sex educator at Venus Envy, which is here. It is an education-based sex shop and bookstore on Barrington Street in downtown Halifax. Although I'm sad that this year I am not giving this talk to you standing on stage in the Rebecca Cohen, which is nice because there's like 1,000 of you packing the seats and laughing at my hilarious jokes. It's kind of nice because now you get to come in and see where I work and actually sort of see a little bit of yourself for yourself instead of me just describing it to you, which is nice. The vibe is a little less TED Talk and a little more welcome to my nighttime talk show. We're half a sex shop, half a bookstore, and a little bit of some other stuff, even though that ruins the fraction. We are a queer and trans-run business that also sells gender-affirming products like binders and gaffs, as well as pride gear, in addition to just sex toys and really great books. We opened in 1998, and we aim to be a friendly, approachable place for you to feel comfortable coming in and asking questions and exploring all sorts of wonderful possibilities. We're a sex-positive business, which means that we believe that consensual sex and sexual expression are fundamentally good and healthy. We host workshops, right now they're all on Zoom, from topics from oral sex to sexting and long-distance relationships. Those last two in high demand right now. But today I'm here not only to introduce you to our shop, but also to introduce you to sex, which I'm sure you have heard of before. But also, I'm sure that none of you know everything that there is to know about sex. I don't know everything that there is to know about sex, and I've been talking about it years, professionally and recreationally. So I'm going to go through the what, the why, and the how of sex. What sex is, why you might want to do it, and lastly, how to do it in ways that are safe and consensual and ideally really fun. And because this year we are learning how to do it in a fucking pandemic, I'll also talk about ways that COVID is affecting how we hook up. Before we get to it though, I want to recognize that while sex can be fun and joyful, it can also be uncomfortable and scary and awkward and dangerous. And so for some of us, these conversations might not feel safe or fun. And so I do my best to be informative and inclusive and funny, but I can't guarantee that this talk is going to be a safe space for everybody. So I encourage you, behind the screen, wherever you are, to do what you have to do to make yourself comfortable. So whether that's just shutting your laptop or walking away or checking in with a friend, whatever you have to do to take care of yourself. I won't mind. All right, what sex? What sex? It's a relatively straightforward question. And the first explanation that many of us are given is that sex means making a baby, which, I don't know about all of you, it is not why I'm currently doing it. Then we start going to school and we hear from ourselves all sorts of new and sort of suspiciously weird information about sex. Like when I was a kid, there was a rumor in my class that periods meant literally laying eggs. That was not true. By the time we're in junior high, a lot of us believe that sex means sticking a penis into a vagina. And with that, we also inherit a whole bunch of other sort of social, cultural concepts that go along with that. And by that I mean the whole sort of persistent, double standard cloud of sex-related bullshit. Stuff like, if you don't want to have sex, you're a prude, you're uncool, but if you do, then it's like slut shame city. Basic stuff like guys always want to have sex and girls have to be convinced, which is so wrong and pretty rape culture-y and excludes a whole lot of people. Oral sex and butt sex are like the sex loopholes when it comes to virginity. I don't know if anyone else grew up really stressed about this stuff, but it's a lot to sort of sort through at once. Considering that sex is literally our bread and butter at Venus Envy, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what sex is. And the definition that we've come to is that sex is any act, and I mean literally any consensual act that brings you erotic pleasure. So sex can happen when you're alone in your room at night, or it can happen between like 14 people in a sex club, or at least it could pre-March. It can happen over your phone when you're a million miles apart. Sex can involve any people of any gender. We like to leave sex so broadly defined for a couple of reasons. And one is that mainstream porn and media often show us only one kind of sex, and that's usually skinny, white, straight, able-bodied, cis people doing it. But that's not reflective of the truth or our world or ourselves or most of our experiences. And the other pro to leaving sex so broadly defined is that it leaves more space for so many more pleasurable equations. If your definition of sex is like the very narrow narrative of you have 2 minutes of foreplay and however many minutes of penetrative sex, and then 1, maybe 2 people have an orgasm and then you're done. It's not super dynamic, and it also excludes so much potential fun. We want sex to be absolutely whatever feels good for you. And sex can be all of these things, but what sex is not is violent. Sex is not non-consensual. If sex is any erotic act performed consensually, then sexual assault and rape are the inverse of that. Anything done to you without your consent is sexual assault. And these acts do not swim around in the big, beautiful ocean of what sex is. They are the gross, rotting oil spill that's polluting the edges. Rape and sexual assault happen in the world. They happen here on campus. And I would be remiss if I did not speak to that truth. And so I want you to go out and enjoy and explore your sexuality with shameless exuberance. And I also want you to be engaged with and aware of how everyone else involved in your particular sexual equation, whatever that looks like, is doing. We live in a world that doesn't give us these tools very well. We hope that I can give some extra tools to you over the course of this talk, and also that you'll learn from other stuff that you're absorbing, other videos, some of those tools. And I hope too that you go out and seek those for yourself. There's a lot of great material out there, and a lot of really good learning and conversations to be had. So that's the what, which then leads us neatly into the why of sex. And just like there's a what sex is and what sex isn't, I want to be really upfront about the why and the why not of sex. I think that there's a big misconception about what sex positivity is, and I said that Venus Envy were a sex positive business. And sometimes people think that sex positivity means being all systems go, all of the time, for all people, and that is not the case, and it's for sure not what we're about. What sex positivity really means is that you are the boss of all of your sex decisions, and that fully also means just saying no to sex altogether. So if you know or think that maybe you're somewhere on the asexual spectrum, if you're choosing to abstain, if you think sex might be fun and cool for future you, but overwhelming for right now you, then that is equally as rad and valid and deserving of support. And anyone else who disagrees with you is an asshole. Tell them that I said so. If the idea of sex does pique your interest, there are, again, a million reasons. You're in love. Someone is really hot. It makes your parts feel good when you think about it. Again, you've been trapped in the same house since March and you are bored. These are all decent reasons, and none of them are wrong as long as what you're doing is totally consensual. There's no universally right reason or right time to have sex. Some of you listening have been having sex for a long time now, and some of you might be very excited to start. We're all moving through the world in our different bodies with different experiences, different desires, different boundaries, and so figuring out if and why you want to have sex, when you want to have it, and who you want to have it with is very much your own personal journey. And those answers aren't written in stone either. Desire is fluid and fluctuating. The raging garbage fire that is 2020 is absolutely having an impact on the why and the why not of our sex drives and our sex lives. So if you are noticing that since lockdown you are high-key horny on main, that is a reasonable reaction and totally normal. If you're noticing that since lockdown your sex drive has utterly vanished and it's a struggle not to spend every day on the couch staring into space, that is also totally normal. COVID has really fucked up the ways that we physically interact with each other and added another layer of complication to some stuff that's already pretty complicated to figure out anyways. Here is the deal. In terms of risk management, having sex with a new partner right now is definitely an increased risk. Bubbles are a way to help mitigate or minimize this risk, and so is having virtual sex. Before lockdown, I was already a big sexting fan, for a few reasons. It's the most fun way I can think of to establish and practice good sex communication skills. Build intimacy, excitement, anticipation, explore fantasies, set boundaries. It's great. Just because it's not happening when you're not physically together doesn't mean it's not, one, hot as fuck, and two, still deserving of the same consent considerations that you would give in-person sex. So this means don't surprise anyone with an unsolicited sext, and don't share anything that you don't have permission to share. You can sext on a lot of platforms, which all have their own varying levels of privacy and security and content protection, but you're never guaranteed total privacy on the internet from Mark Zuckerberg. And so I suggest you follow your heart and set your own boundaries and comfort levels in terms of what you share and where. So whether that is having Skype sex or mailing your partner a dirty letter and insisting that they burn it after, your call. That brings me to the safest way to have sex right now, which coincidentally happens to be my all-time #1 favorite sex act, friends. Now, more than ever, in these uncertain times, there's no better chance to seize than to masturbate. Great time to masturbate. Your #1 guaranteed safest sex partner is yourself. For many reasons, I've been telling people to masturbate for years as part of my job. But this is the first time I've been backed up by various government public health agencies, and that's a small silver lining to this whole thing. Not only is having sex with yourself the safest way to do it right now, it's also the best way to get to know your own body and desires. Where do you like being touched? How do you like being touched? Aside from sexy self-research, it's a real gift to yourself to take a break from everything else. There is so much going on. Also, you're starting school, and just let your body feel pleasure. To that end, a useful thing to learn about is a little bit about our bodies and our genitals, specifically. Before I get into talking about anatomy, I want to talk for a sec about why we talk about anatomy. I like to give a little anatomy lesson that's pleasure-based, because talking about how our bodies work as sources of pleasure is useful, I think, instead of only talking about them as reproduction machines. I think it's useful specifically to the sex that I have, and it's also a good first step in erasing some of the shame that we learn. Pleasure is totally a valid function of our bodies, just as much as reproduction or whatever. I don't think we hear that enough, so I will say it again. Our bodies are built to feel good. I also think it's important to talk about our junk because it's where a lot of myths and misconceptions get placed. So here on this stool beside me, I have 2 styles of genitals and also one enormous butt. We get taught a lot of things about these genitals. We get taught that if your anatomy looks like this, then you grow up and you love throwing axes for fun and getting dirt under your fingernails and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And we get taught that if you're born and your genitals end up looking like this, then you grow up and you love pastel aesthetics and fluffy kittens like the ones on toilet paper packages, and also Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but for different reasons. These sound like ridiculous, very simplified, binaristic ideas, but this is how our beliefs on gender and sex get informed from day one. This is called the gender binary, and if you can't tell from the tone of my voice already, I think that it's bullshit. At Venus Envy, we very firmly believe that any person can have any body part and be of any gender. The bits that you have don't define your gender, they don't define who you want to have sex with, how you want to do it. That's all you. I also want to emphasize that genitals are not uniform. No two look the same. There is so much variation in terms of size and shape, color. Regardless of what parts you have, I want you to do something, which is to go home and look at them and touch them and name them. And I don't mean like, I guess I'll call you Barbara. I mean like find a word or a term that feels right and hot and that you like hearing and that you like saying. I want you to do this because I want to encourage you to own your body. It's yours, it's only yours, and knowing how you like it to be referred to is a really important first step in having good sex. And then the other thing that I want you to do is the next time, whenever that is, that you are getting intimately acquainted with a new person, I want you to ask what they like their stuff to be called. And then that way, you know that you're going to use words that are going to make times hot and not the opposite. You don't want to unintentionally use a word or a term that's a turnoff or misgendering or otherwise just not an ideal choice. For now when I'm talking, I'll mostly use kind of science class language, words like shaft and vulva and perineum, which are super sexy. No, they're not. Not for me anyways. These words don't work for everyone for a whole host of reasons, but I'll use them now so we're all on the same page. This is a very brief rundown of some, let's say, premium hotspots. So I'm going to start by talking about the clit and the frenulum. I'm starting with these parts because they're where the highest concentration of nerve endings are on each of these kinds of body parts. So, the clit. It's so fun, so often forgotten, baffling, and so much bigger than people think. So, this is a vulva, and usually you can see the shaft of the clit sort of right here. And that shaft is just the tip of the iceberg. If you think of like a wishbone shape, the shaft is the tip of the wishbone, and the legs of the wishbone extend underneath the surface of the body. And the whole thing can swell and get basically an under the surface erection when someone is turned on. Some clits are big, some are small, some are in between the parts that you can see, the shaft. And it's also often hidden by something called the clitoral hood, which you can sort of pull back, sort of like a foreskin for the shaft of the clitoris. You can pull it back to get a better access. And so to check this out and see what your bit's like if you have a clit, you can try sort of flicking it like a light switch or circling it like a honey cruller, which is the best donut. And use lube while you do this. I'll talk a little bit more about lube later. Over here, we have the frenulum. Frenulum's this spot right here. It's just on the underside of the shaft. This is where foreskin attaches, if someone has foreskin, but regardless, the sweet spot is full of nerve endings. Subsequently, it can be a good spot to apply some focus and pressure to, either with a tongue or a thumb or whatever. And a quick note about shafts here. If you have a shaft, if you're hooking up with someone who does, you might notice that this is the part of the penis that gets erect. Often, erections are a sign of someone being turned on, but not necessarily and not all the time. Erections are simply an indication of blood flowing into the penis. Someone might be super turned on and not have an erection for a variety of reasons, or someone might get hard but not be turned on. It's just their body doing their thing. Also, penises that aren't erect can still orgasm. So the best way to figure out if someone is into what you're doing is to ask them. Same thing goes for wetness and vulvas. Next, I'm going to talk about the G-spot and the prostate. And again, I'm pairing these together because they're sort of parallel spots. The G-spot is located a couple inches inside the vagina. And on people with penises, the prostate can be felt similar depth and similar angle, but from inside the butt. To stimulate the G-spot and the prostate, you do this sort of curved come hither gesture. Come hither is a phrase that I've never in my life used in any other context than to tell people how to stimulate a G-spot or a prostate. But you do this come hither beckon, and you want to do that by pushing towards the belly button, whether it's your body or whether it's someone else's, towards the belly button. The G-spot's located a couple inches inside the vagina, and for a lot of people it responds well to firm pressure. And for some, pressing hard here can lead to a deep, really achy, full body, shaky behind your knees sort of orgasm. Or combining G-spot pressure with other forms of stimulation, like for a highly recommended example, clit stimulation, they can lead to an intensified orgasm. The G-spot is easiest to find when someone's turned on. It fills with fluid and sort of changes in texture, and you can sort of feel a difference in texture between the G-spot and the rest of the vagina. And for some, pressing on it can feel really great. It can also sometimes lead to ejaculation, which I assure you is a real and wonderful thing. And for some, the G-spot is something that they never really get into, which is totally fine. It is one potential fun spot in a very wide network of other potential fun spots, and it's not the be-all and end-all. It's also never an excuse for someone to think that penetration and only penetration can get someone off, because that's not the case for lots of folks. So, the prostate. Similar to the G-spot, the prostate is a gland that can be found a couple inches inside someone's body. This very large demo butt, but you want to reach into the butt. It feels hard and rough, sort of like a walnut. Unlike the G-spot, it always feels the same regardless of if someone's turned on or not. And its function is producing prostatic fluid, which is a part of semen. Applying pressure against the prostate using that sort of curved beckon. You could use like a well-lubricated, maybe even gloved finger, can lead to similar sorts of achy, deep bodies or shaky behind your knees, intensified sensations. Talking about the prostate leads very nicely into the last part I want to talk about, which is the butt. Our butts can be really complicated spots. We all know their primary function. It's the same for everyone, it's pooping. But along with that, we also probably have absorbed a lot of misinformation around the butt. I know I grew up being taught some definitely wrong things. For example, touching butts makes you gay, which is not true. It's just lazy homophobia. The butt is an exit, not an entrance. Also not true. It's just a door. If you put too much stuff in your butt, then things, namely poop, will just fall out of it for the rest of time. Also not true. I could go on, but to be brief, I'll just say for all bodies, the butt is a totally valid spot to enjoy exploring and to experience pleasure in. It's full of nerve endings, which means that even like the slightest gentle touch can register as really intense sensation. And with this, the butt is also a totally valid spot to not want to touch, and if you have no interest in that zone, totally okay. Our butts can be complicated for a whole myriad of reasons, from past shitty experiences to health concerns, and I just don't want you to let other people make up your mind in any direction here. Make your own mind up about what you want to do with your own butt. If you're interested in touching your butt, there's some key important rules, which are to go slow, start really small, use lots and lots of lube, and to make sure anything that goes in has a base. Above all, if you're with another person, communicate constantly. Alright, so now you know a little bit about what's in your pants, but there is so much more to do in it, whether that's masturbating or hooking up with someone else, than basic anatomy. In this last section, I'm going to share with you some of my quintessential tips for how to have sex. I'll talk to you about how to do it in ways that are safe or safer, and then we'll end on how to do it in ways that just might feel particularly good. So, usually, when I'm talking about safety, I'm talking about ideally not getting STIs and definitely practicing some hot and steamy consent, not being a nerd here. When you're doing it right, consent is hot, hot, hot. But this year, because of obvious reasons, safety now includes some COVID-specific stuff to know. I've already outlined the general continuum of risk and activity, getting off solo being the safest, 10 out of 10, highly recommend. But I know plenty of in-person sex is happening too, and there's additional stuff to know. A lot of it is pretty similar to my usual STI spiel, but COVID adds an extra kind of high-stakes twist. Unlike STIs, we don't fully know how it works. It's much easier to transmit, and we don't have a way to treat it. It's not great. I know you know this. The semi-good news-ish is that if you're taking COVID-specific precautions when you're hooking up, you're also doing a good job of having STI-specific safer sex. Taking COVID out of the picture for a second, ideally when I have sex with someone, we're not going to get or transmit any STIs. But the reality of 2 or more bodies coming together and rubbing up on each other is that STIs happen. For example, current stats estimate that 70% of people in North America have or are going to have, at some point in time, HPV. I got HPV in university. STIs are going to happen to many of us, and often they can be treated and leave your body. Chlamydia, gonorrhea, some kinds of HPV. These are STIs that, if you get tested and get treated, aren't going to stay in your body forever. HIV, herpes, other strands of HPV, now those are some STIs that you'll carry forever and you'll learn how to deal with. You'll get really great at communicating about sex, and your sex life will be wonderful because of it, I promise. I'm not trying to tell you that STIs aren't a big deal. Of course they are, they suck. Instead, what I'm trying to tell you is that they don't need to be as shame-inducing as we often make them, because they're something that most of us deal with at one time or another. STIs are passed through various fluids, and we know for sure that COVID is passed through spit. COVID has also been found in semen and poop, and at least at the time that I'm recording this, it's still unclear if it transmits sexually. So what does this mean for safer sex protocols? One is that you want to use barriers. And if you're having sex with someone that you don't already live and share regular germs with, also minimize face-to-face contact, kissing, swabbing spit. You might remember from earlier this summer, the British Columbia government released a fantastic COVID safer sex guideline that recommended barriers from masks to glory holes, and then glory holes trended on Twitter, and pervs like me were over the moon. Other safer sex barriers that I would talk about in any other given year are regular condoms, internal condoms, gloves, dental dams. These are all varying barrier methods that basically serve to keep fluids from coming into contact with membranes. Safer sex protocol number 2 is to get tested. I mean, COVID, if you feel that that's a risk, and also for STIs. It is still super important to seek out whether that's safer sex related healthcare or just other healthcare in general. Clinics are still open and they're still super accessible. I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely had the experience of making some less than ideal choices along the throes of passion, and then waking up the next morning and panicking that my clit was a genital wart. Maybe that's a little extreme. However, if you find yourself in this situation, for the love of God, don't Google genital warts. It is not the best thing to do in that moment. It'll only be a mistake. Instead, utilize your school and local resources. There's a lot of them at Dal and in Halifax generally. And it's also super important to not ignore symptoms or delay getting diagnosed when you notice it. Lots of STIs, not a big deal, really easy to treat and clear up if you address them promptly. It's when you sort of hope that it'll go away on its own and kind of bury your head in the sand that things can get a little harder. And then the last thing to do is to communicate about STIs. It's totally normal to ask someone when they last got tested, and in this new coronavirus world, it's also totally fine to ask someone about what their COVID-specific protocols are. For me, it makes perfect sense. I mean, this is my body, and if I'm going to let someone literally inside my body, or up around, or smushed up against it, I want to know what might happen. It's also totally normal to tell someone that you have an STI. If you're stressed about having that conversation, I have a couple conversation formulas that I like to give. You can ask me about them later. There's going to be a little Q&A session in a couple days. Okay, so practicing safer sex techniques, one important part about having good sex. The other important thing to practice is consent. I'm not addressing consent in depth here because I know that that's been covered for you already, or it will be covered. I don't know what order you're going to receive these videos in. But I will emphasize that the tools to having incredible sex and consensual sex are the exact same tools. It's purely about communicating and being keyed into each other's responses, desires, reactions. It's very hot. The final important how in the how to have sex question is how do we put it all together and make it feel good? I don't want to lay all of this stuff out for you and then skim over the very real learning curve that comes with sex. When I had sex for the first time, I had a whole lot of enthusiasm and very little skills, which is totally normal. It's normal if you're doing or learning any other new thing. For that reason, I need to tell you that you shouldn't put pressure on yourself to be amazing or get everything right off the bat. Hopefully, you'll remember some good starting info from this talk, like maybe where the clit is. But I don't want you to feel stressed or like a failure if you take everything to heart, put everything into practice, and don't have a million orgasms right off the bat. A fellow brilliant sex educator, Karen B.K. Chan, who works in Toronto, talks about sex like a jam session, where people who have a ground rule understanding, mutual respect, mutual interest, and excitement create some sweet, sweet music for as long as they want. I really like this analogy, and it applies to getting off by yourself too. I think if you start like singing or playing saxophone or whatever in an empty room, you might feel a little bit silly and self-conscious, and it might take some time to shake that off and figure out where you want to go with the music before you eventually hit your stride. When you're improvising music together with another person for the first time, it might sound a little discordant at first, it might take some time to get the rhythm right, especially if you're new to playing music altogether, or maybe you're just new to improvising, or maybe you're learning a new instrument than what you're used to playing, or maybe you're a seasoned pro but playing with a new musician. This is really just the analogy that keeps on giving. But I don't want you to get into this place and then panic freeze and have default sex, as in defaulting to what you see in movies, whether that's porn or otherwise, because you're not sure what to do or what the other person is gonna like. I think that that kind of sex leads to you having sex at someone instead of having sex with someone, and that's not great sex, and that's not what I want for you. I want you to have creative, totally personalized, one-of-a-kind sex. I think that there's a key to this. Maybe you're not gonna love it, but my professional sex advice to you here is to humor me and give it a shot. And that key is to let your performance guard down and get vulnerable. How unfun. Well, listen, incredible sex is not about mastering a series of complicated moves or spelling out the alphabet with your tongue, although I applaud anyone who learns those things because I think it shows effort and dedication, which should be rewarded. It's about creativity, connection, and collaboration. Being present in the moment, being mindful, being playful. Those are things that you can only tap into if you break through the trap of being silently boxed in by pressure and trying to be impressive and being afraid of fucking up. Unless you're masturbating, you're not in this experience alone. And to make a space where you can all feel like it's okay to let your guard down and be creative and possibly try some things that aren't gonna work, and then you laugh it off and get back into it. Everything and everyone involved has to feel a certain level of trust. For some of us, having checked out or not fully engaged or defaulty sex is not because those pressures or fears, but because of trauma. And this means extra emphatically that everyone involved should feel a certain level of trust, especially because I am of the opinion that we're all traumatized to varying degrees by COVID right now. It's useful to learn some grounding techniques for if you or your partner begin to check out or disassociate or feel anxiety during sex. These are things to do to ground yourself or to bring yourself back into your body, like taking deep, regular breaths, and doing what is often called the 5 senses technique. So that's counting 5 things that you see around you, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. This is a pretty common one, and there's other ones that are out there. And then listen to your body. If you want to just be held or be alone, or you want to dive back in, those are all valid. Ahead of time, if you aren't feeling that level of trust or aren't in the jam session spirit, or don't feel that the other person is, that's also a great reason to step back, to not hook up, and have a wonderful and fulfilling masturbation session. I know you understand by now how I feel about masturbating. It's always a great idea in my book. Regardless of if you're having sex alone or with partners, I'll end off with a quick little Sex Toys 101. Yes, we are a store that specializes in sex toys. Yes, I am sitting under a banner that says I masturbate. I think that they're high-key useful, whether you're alone, whether you're with partners. The most important thing to know about toys is also the second most important thing to know about sex in general, number 1 being that you gotta communicate, and that is lube. Lube is the best. Lube makes everything feel great. You might think that you don't need it or you don't want it, but humor me and give it a try and see how it goes. I swear on everything that is most important to me, it's worth it. There's a lot of crappy, sticky lube out there. There's also a lot of really great, really body-friendly lube, and it's worth the research to get yourself something good. So here are a few of my favorite things about sex toys. Sex toys can make things physically easier. So if you like sensations that are hard for hands to create or sustain, if that's like moving your fingers or moving your whole hand back and forth really fast for a long time, little vibrators, big vibrators, stroker sleeves for penises can really save you some arm cramps. Toys can also help with angles and with reach. They can act as an extra hand when yours are all occupied, things that'll stay in on your own, things that won't like turn you into a pretzel, to get the good angle. I don't know how much the mics pick up. I do think that one day I'll start an ASMR channel just for vibrators. And you can also strap stuff to your body with harnesses like these in hot and helpful ways. To break them down by sensation or by function, toys can vibrate. I think one of the really cool things about sex toys is that they can create so many different sensations that you can't make with your own body. It's so much fun to explore. If there was like another way of feeling really good sensations, why not give it a shot? Toys can vibrate. Vibrations can range between sort of slow and rumbly to more high-pitched or high buzzy. They can be gentle or intense. This one. And they can feel great on any sort of tissue, whether that's a clit or a frenulum or a butthole or ones like this, which is a vibrator designed for the shaft of a penis. Toys can penetrate. Some of them can even thrust on their own, like this one, which is like if a shake weight was a dildo. This can give a feeling of fullness. It can stimulate the sensitive nerve-filled endings of butts and of vaginas. Also like this little butt plug. And toys can suction or constrict. So when you apply suction to a body part with erectile tissue, where's my little, I dropped my little nipple sucker. So, when you apply suction to a body part with erectile tissue, so that can be a nipple, that can be the shaft of a clit, that can be the shaft of a penis, that can be the whole entire vulva, you're pulling blood to the surface of the skin so that it becomes engorged and extra sensitive. Constriction rings, or these, trap the blood inside a penis to extend that sort of engorged and extra sensitive feeling. There are also a sort of new category of toys that feel like suction but aren't suction, and that's these sort of air pulse toys. I don't know if you can hear this one. So these are toys that use a little mechanism that pulses air back and forth It goes around the shaft of the clit, stays in place, and gives a feeling of suction, but not any actual suction. Because eventually that would be a vacuum that would give your clit a hickey and it would not be very fun. This is just all of the good fun stuff. And lastly, toys falling within the big, broad realm of BDSM or kink, which would honestly require a whole other workshop to do justice. Play around with sensations ranging from soft and ticklish to hard and spanky. That was a good smack. And these ones that I've just held up are a teeny sliver of what you can find in our magical shop. Ooh, I almost forgot about the Weevibe. This is an entire category of toy that you can control with a smartphone app from anywhere in the world, making it very good for anyone who's now in a long-distance situation. Because the app is a lot of fun to play around with. There's a whole lot of options out there. So these ones that I just held up, just a little bit of what you can find in our little shop. You can come visit to explore the rest. We are currently, as of right now, open to walk-in customers, just around 6 or so people at a time. Everyone wears masks. We're also open to, you can place orders over Instagram direct message at Venus Envy HFX or through Facebook. We're at Venus Envy Halifax. We can do free local delivery. We can do curbside pickup every single day. And on Tuesdays, you get 10% off everything for Student Tuesday. If you order on the website, it comes from our sister shop in Ottawa. That's important to note. Just direct message us or give us a phone call. Thank you so much for watching me on a screen. I wish I was with you in person. I hope that you go forth and learn your body and have some hot, safe, consensual, sexy times, despite, or maybe because, everything that we are living through right now. I'll be on Instagram Live with the DSU on September 3rd on Thursday to do a little Q&A session. So send in your questions, visit the shop, or send me an email directly if you ever want to ask me anything. My email is Christine@venusenvy.ca. And we're here, we're excited to talk to you. Welcome to Halifax.